Hey everyone, welcome back to Corporate Decoder. Today, Golden Minerals Company just filed an 8K detailing their latest shareholder meeting, and I am seeing a clear signal about their board's direction. Quick note, this is not financial advice, just my take on public filings for educational purposes. The company held its annual meeting and re-elected its entire slate of directors. But the vote counts themselves tell a more intriguing story about investor engagement. So, Golden Minerals Company, a small player in the mining sector with just 3 employees and a market cap of around $3 million, recently held its annual shareholder meeting on the 12th of June 2026. This filing is essentially a report on what happened at that meeting, specifically the votes on key proposals. It is a way for public companies to keep their investors and the Securities and Exchange Commission informed about important decisions made by shareholders. The main event here was the shareholder vote. Think of it like the company asking its owners, the shareholders, to officially approve certain actions. In this case, 2 major things were up for a vote. First, shareholders had to vote on electing the company's board of directors. The board is the group of people who oversee the company's strategy and management. For the second proposal, shareholders were asked to ratify, which means to officially approve or confirm, the company's choice of auditors. Auditors are the independent accountants who check the company's financial records to make sure they are accurate. Now let's dive into how those votes actually went. This is where things get interesting. A total of 15,153,048 shares of common stock were outstanding and eligible to vote. Out of those, about 5.4 million shares, or roughly 36%, were represented at the meeting, either in person or by proxy, meaning shareholders gave someone else permission to vote on their behalf. A 36% turnout might seem low, and for a company this size, it is actually typical. It suggests a lot of shareholders are not actively engaged on a day-to-day basis. For the election of directors, the outcome was as expected. All 5 nominees, Jeffrey G. Clevenger, Pablo Castanos, Deborah J. Friedman, Kevin R. Morano, and David H. Watkins were approved to serve. This means the current leadership or proposed leadership is supported by the shareholders who voted. This generally indicates continuity and that the current strategy is in place. But here is where we need to look closer. The actual vote counts reveal a split. For Jeffrey G. Clevenger, for example, there were 545,157 votes for his election, but a significant 491,007 votes were cast withheld. This means nearly half the votes cast against him chose not to support him. When you add in the broker non-votes, which is when a broker holds shares for a client but doesn't have voting instructions, that number balloons to over 4.4 million. This level of withheld votes for multiple directors is a signal that not everyone is fully behind the current board members. It is a soft warning that a portion of the voting shareholders have concerns or reservations. It is not a revolt, but it is definitely not a resounding unanimous endorsement either. Similarly, for Pablo Castanos, there were 538,939 votes for 497,225 withheld, and the same 4,423,766 broken non-votes. The pattern is consistent across all 5 nominees. This tells us that if you own shares, and your broker voted them without your specific instruction, those shares are counted as broker non-votes. And in this specific director election, they do not count towards either the for or withheld tally. However, the substantial number of withheld votes themselves suggest that shareholders who did vote directly or provide instructions are expressing some level of dissatisfaction or caution regarding the nominees. For Deborah J. Friedman, we see 532,664 votes for, 503,500 votes withheld, and again 4,423,766 broken non-votes. The number of withheld votes is just slightly higher than the votes for her. This indicates a significant portion of the voting shareholders are opting not to support her fully. The gap between for and withheld votes is quite small across all directors. This isn't a ringing endorsement. Kevin R. Morano received 549,854 votes for and 486,310 withheld votes, with the broken non-votes remaining constant. While he has a slightly wider margin of support than some others, the withheld number is still very high, indicating a lack of enthusiastic backing. And finally, David H. Watkins garnered 550,604 votes for and 485,560 votes withheld, plus the broken non-votes. He has the highest for vote count among the directors, but the number of withheld votes is still substantial and very close to the positive votes. This suggests a real division among the shareholders who are actively participating in the vote. Now, let's look at the second proposal, ratifying the appointment of Heine & Company as the company's independent auditor. This vote is usually more of a formality to confirm the board's decision. Here, the results are quite different. There were 3-2-8-65 votes in favor of ratifying the auditors, and only 21,034,99 votes against. There were also 28,266 abstentions. This means that while there was some opposition, the majority of the voting shareholders supported keeping Heine & Company as the auditor. This is a positive sign for the company's financial oversight, as it shows confidence in their accounting firm. Compared to the director election, the auditor ratification vote shows a much clearer mandate. The significant difference between for and against suggests shareholders are comfortable with the choice of auditor for the fiscal year ending the 31st of December 2026. This is important because a strong relationship with an auditor builds trust in the company's financial reporting. Looking at the broader picture, Golden Minerals has had some recent news about a mining investor taking a stake in positive first quarter results for 2026. However, this filing highlights a potential undercurrent of shareholder concern about the board itself. While the directors were re-elected, the significant number of withheld votes suggests that a substantial portion of shareholders are not fully satisfied with the current leadership. This could be a precursor to future activism, or a sign that management needs to address shareholder concerns more directly. The fact that they re-elected the board despite these withheld votes might indicate that there weren't any alternative candidates put forward, or that the board has enough committed support to stay in place. The filing is signed by Pablo Castanos, who is listed as President and Chief Executive Officer. This is standard procedure for these types of reports. Overall, this 8K tells us that Golden Minerals shareholders approved the auditor, which is good news for financial transparency. However, the director votes show a divided sentiment among those who actively participated, with a notable number of withheld votes. This indicates that while the current board remains in place, there is room for improvement in gaining full shareholder confidence. The risk I am watching is whether these withheld votes lead to more direct shareholder engagement or pressure for changes in the future. What I'm actually looking for is to see if this sentiment evolves in subsequent shareholder meetings. Oh, and the research tools I actually use are linked in the description. They help keep this channel going. That is my take. Stay decoded. Like, comment, subscribe, and join our Discord if you want to dive deeper.